Good evening and welcome to Real Talk. So glad that you guys are here. And I want to give a quick shout out to all of our campuses, Hazlitt, Northlake, Bedford, Grapevine. Thank you guys so much for joining us. And if this is your very first time here to FOTP, we are so glad that you've joined us tonight. It's going to be a great night. We got some amazing things planned for you just to learn, and what a great topic for us to address at this time of year on anxiety. So I'm really excited to learn about this. But before we get going, there's one crucial part about this whole programming that we really want you guys to take part in. And that is our Q&A that we're going to be doing. I don't know about you, but that is my most favorite time. And I want to welcome all the students that are here at all of the campuses. Students love to ask questions. So, hey, again, thank you guys so much for being a part of this. But we have questions, and this time we want you guys to text them in. And like me, when our speaker is speaking, we go, oh, I would love to ask this question. But then we wait to the end and we forget. So go ahead, when you get that question, start typing on your phone and text that in. All your questions are anonymous, so we're not going to know who is asking that question. But I do ask this one thing, that you put which campus that you are at so we can make sure we shout out to that campus and make sure we highlight that question. And so make sure you text your question to 817-482-3613. Text your questions to 817-482-3613. And, you know, Bree, I'm just so excited that we have so many people taking part in this, which makes me really pumped that, you know what, we're going to have a great holiday because we're all going to have something that we all deal with under control.
Yes, me too. Anxiety is so common. That's why we have 450 people who signed up to be here tonight. You guys, yes. You guys took the chance to sign up for something like this so that we can have a better holiday experience. So I'm so glad that you're here. I'm so excited to welcome Dr. Cassie Reid. You may know her from our depression talk that we had in June and our parent connection we had in September. She's a licensed professional counselor, been in the field for many years, and has a private practice over in Southlake. So y'all give her a warm welcome.
Yes, big warm welcome.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited. I feel like I'm part of your church now. I've been here a few times and I've had such great reception. So thank you so much for welcoming me back. And one of the things you have to know about me, even though there's a lot of you here tonight, is I'm super laid back. So I do want you to ask questions. That is my absolute favorite thing. I always tell people, it's my joke. I say it every time. It's free therapy. So you would have to come pay me money. So might as well ask your questions. So text them. If something I say doesn't make sense, feel free to ask that in the text thread as well. I am so excited that the students are in here tonight. That's amazing. So I taught college for 10 years, and I actually used to work down the street at Central High School. Does anybody go to Central? A couple people. Okay. So I used to work down the street at Central High School. Oh, I got a boo. That's not nice. But I love talking. I work with teens and all different types of people at my practice. So I'm excited. Feel free to come in, make yourself comfortable. One of the things that I'm passionate about, and if you've heard me speak before, I am a professional counselor. My PhD is in marriage and family therapy. I actually also am ordained. So I worked at the King's University for about 10 years. I developed their master's in marriage and family therapy program. And I've been really privileged to do that. And so I am so excited. I'm sure even throughout the campuses, I'm so excited that all of your campuses are here. My friend Alex is at Grapevine. So hi, Alex. And she's the one who actually connected me to Fellowship of the Parks through a lot of conversations that we've had about mental health and spirituality and the clinical side. So my passion is taking those two things and stirring them together. So what you will hear from me tonight is some clinical things. I'm going to give you some clinical definitions. We're going to practice some techniques, so don't leave. It's going to be awesome. But some ways that we can kind of manage our anxiety in the moment. But I also am really passionate about hearing the Holy Spirit and hearing the Lord speak to us about anxiety. Because what I feel like is no two people may experience anxiety the same. So one of my strengths is individualization, and I believe that every person has a unique experience with anxiety or depression or anything that they face. And I won't lie to you, I always tell my clients this, I tell my students this. I have a therapist. I went yesterday, and it's really important for me to practice what I preach. So there are seasons and times when I will actually struggle with a little bit of anxiety or maybe just feeling low, and so I'm very in tune with myself, and also encourage those around me to be as well. So I'm not above going and talking to someone myself as a therapist. You want your therapist to have a therapist because you don't want them working it out with you when you're paying them to come talk about your problems. So one of the things that I felt like I heard the Lord say to me is just that sometimes there's like 3 phases of anxiety. Sometimes we get so caught up in the future that we miss out on the present. Sometimes we get so caught up in the future that we miss out on the present. So I call this pre-worrying. I'm very good at pre-worrying. So I can go through all the scenarios, all the things. I have a 9-year-old daughter, and she's hilarious. I dropped her off on the way here. She has basketball practice, and she's like, I can tell in the back seat, she's kind of having a moment. I said, babe, what's happening? She's like, I don't know. I have to go to practice. It's her first time for the season to practice. I said, listen, you're pre-worrying. Let's go. Let's see how it is. I told her to suss it out, to which she thinks I'm hilarious because I like try to say hip lingo and I'm just not as hip. But so I told her just feel it out. But we've got this language in our house now. We're not going to pre-worry. But I think what we do as people is sometimes we want to fast forward the clock a little bit, and we're so busy looking forward that we fail to miss the moment. And I think there's so many things that happen in the moment that we would want to take advantage of. Another thing that we do sometimes is we get so caught up in the past is that we miss the present. Is that we're so worried about thinking about, oh man, if I would have done that differently, or oh, if I would have had a different childhood. That's the thing that I'd like to say. I experienced every kind of abuse growing up. I grew up in West Virginia. I have my teeth and I wear my shoes, but I didn't marry my cousin, just for clarity. But I grew up in West Virginia, and there's a lot of things that happened to me growing up that I actually wish wouldn't have happened. And I had to make a decision at one point in my life to say, I'm not going to move backwards, and I'm not going to let what happened back there keep me from living right here, right now. And I also think sometimes we allow the present to steal from the present. So I'm going to talk about it a little bit later, but keeping up with the Joneses, I hate those people. No offense if your last name is Jones. I don't really hate you, but I hate the Joneses and that whole concept, because I think what happens to us is we start looking around and we're in the moment and we could really be having this great experience, and we miss it because we're too busy looking around and we're allowing anxiety to make our brain think, oh my gosh, what's happening? What's going on? I love that you talked about the holidays, because I'm going to do a shameless plug. You let me have the microphone, so here we are. I actually have a book on the holidays that I wrote, and I'm going to tell you what I really wanted to call it, but my publisher was like, no, you cannot call it that. I wanted to call it, and don't hate me, Hallmark is a Liar. I really did. Like, I proposed that title because my mind, I watch Hallmark movies with my family, and I literally was like, first of all, who drinks that much cocoa? I mean, literally, that is like my biggest beef with Hallmark movies. I'm like, I may drink 1 cup of cocoa the whole entire year. These people will be drinking it like water on these Hallmark movies. And I'm like, and I feel like they always show this scene where all the families gathered around the tree and every present is perfectly wrapped. No one is angry. No one looks disheveled. Everyone looks perfectly rested. And they're all sitting there with their cocoa, opening the gifts one at a time. If anybody has that Christmas, please come find me, because I will find the flaws in your family, because that is not real life. That is not real life. I am coming Christmas morning, bags under my eyes. I've finished wrapping the gifts. I've been up all night making a casserole and who knows else, trying to put something together. And I just think that Hallmark can be a liar. And so then what happens to people, though, is they watch that movie and they hold it next to the reality, and they feel like they failed. They feel shame. They feel guilt. They feel like, why isn't my family? Why aren't my parents here sitting around the tree with me? Why aren't my kids wanting to come bounding down the stairs in their matching pajamas and feel like everything's going to be groovy when they come into the living room? Like, I can barely get them out of bed, like if you think about some of those things, so it steals from you. So I decided to write a book about it. I actually had a really irritating Christmas with my sister. And so I just started venting. I started writing on my phone, just like I was just irritated one morning, and I'm sitting on my couch, the tree's on, it's like 7 a.m., and I'm just like, like just plugging out some notes in my phone with my teeth just clenched, and I'm like so irritated. I just felt like the Lord visited me, and he said, hold on a second. I want to talk to you about this. And I just like was like so mad at him because I was like, shh, just be quiet and let me have this moment of just being in my angst, being frustrated, being anxious, being irritated. And he just started to speak to me. So I put it on Facebook. And literally, probably an hour later, it had been reposted. All these people were like, please write more, tell us more. And I'm like, I just was venting and hoping my sister would read it, because then I was like, then maybe she would know how I really felt, because I didn't want to tell her directly, just being honest. But like literally, I just started, so then I just developed into more and more. So I wrote a book called Unwrapped, Open the Gift of Holiday Sanity. You should be able to find it on Amazon. I will warn you, if you search Unwrapped alone, I don't know what will come up, so my name might be a better option. I've done it before, and it gets a little crazy, so Cassie Reid, R-E-I-D. But I wrote the book. It's 25 chapters. They're really, really tiny, and it's just for you to read about different concepts throughout the holidays, because Hallmark is a liar. So that's my belief still. So let me give you some facts. Are we good? Everybody here? Everybody with me? I'm going to check on you because I need feedback. It's really true. I am teaching college. My students would come in the first day and they'd be like, cool, we're going to sit here on our phone. No. I was like, wait, you're going to talk back to me. So one of the things is anxiety is actually more common than you think. And one of the tools of the enemy to me is that it ends up being a thing that steals from us because we start a comparison game. We say, oh, it's just me. I'm the only one that feels like this. I'm the only one. I can't get it together. Look at that person. They're able to do this, and I'm not able to do that. Look, how are they able to look like that when they come to church? It took me everything just to get here today. And you just go through all the things, and you'd be like, look how together they seem. And I think what happens is we start looking around, and the reality is a lot of people struggle with anxiety, and I think a lot more people than you realize. And the enemy wants to make you feel like it's just you. It's only you. You're the only one. You're the only one that's going to struggle with this. You're the only one that has this problem. And that is untrue. I will tell you, I even struggle with that. As a therapist who's been trained for 11 extra years of school or something like that, I still struggle. And there are days when I'm like, you know what? I can't today. I just need to figure out where I am in my body. I need to figure out what's happening with me and what I'm thinking, what I'm feeling, and invite the Lord into that space. I think that they are actually, since pre or post COVID, and I'll probably talk about this, we have seen anxiety shoot up so high for people because so much happened during that time. And I might talk about that later, but I think one of the things that I found that was the most significant is we lost a sense of control. We didn't get to be the boss of our own lives in a lot of ways. So we were told what we were going to do. And again, good, bad, or ugly, whatever side of the aisle you're on, I'm not here to talk politics, but I am here to talk about what happens to the human nature when we feel restrained, when we feel controlled, right? We started to think, oh my gosh, what's going to happen? What's going on? What am I going to do? Am I going to get sick? Am I going to die? Are people think it's going to go wrong? My kids are home. My kids are freaking home, and I want to send them to school, right? The kids were freaking out because they couldn't be with their friends. They couldn't go do certain things. You could hardly shop. There were just a lot of things that we were put on a restriction without our control. And so what happened with people is I think they started to really assess, and that fear of having that pattern repeated had anxiety rise 25%, specifically between 13 and 18 years of age. So you've heard me talk before. I talk a lot about social media, and I talk a lot about how our culture has changed. And my daughter said to me, I'm going to date myself. She's like, Mom, well, when you had a phone in school, I was like, I didn't have a phone in school. I'm old enough that I didn't have one when I was in school. We didn't have that. We went home and had to pick one up that was connected to the wall. It's fine. I'm okay. I look really good for my age. But I just think that people don't understand that input, right? All of that stuff that's happening. And then after COVID and all of that is happening so much. But 1 in 10 people are affected by anxiety disorders. So if we did the math here, just think about that, right? So if you're sitting here thinking, at least you or probably someone you know has been affected by it in some capacity, which is probably why you're sitting here. Even if you want to just say you're here for a friend, that's great. At least you're here. 20% of the adult population does experience some form of anxiety each year. But I want to go over a little bit. I want to go over the types of anxiety. Because anxiety, like I said, I have this strength. If you've ever taken the Gallup Strengths Finder, has anyone taken this? All 2 of you. Okay, everyone needs to go on there. No, not everyone, but it's really my favorite assessment because it teaches you about yourself. And it's so powerful. If the more power you have, the more knowledge you have, the more power you have. Knowledge to me, one of my favorite book of the Bible is Proverbs. Wisdom. I want to gain wisdom so that I'm able to then know who I am. So what this is, it's called Gallup. It was StrengthsFinder, but I think they've changed it now to Gallup Strengths. It's an app you can download. You can either get the top 5 or you can get all of your strengths. But what it does is it tells you the themes of your life that actually you excel in. So one of mine is individualization, which means I can't lump everybody together, which I already told you. So with anxiety, I like to let you know the different parts of it so that you're able to understand what might be happening for you or someone you love. The first one is generalized anxiety disorder. This is kind of the generic one, right? Generalized anxiety disorder. This one is just basic, simple, like I'm freaking out about something, right? I would give myself that diagnosis when I struggle with anxiety. That would be what I would say I have. I don't like diagnoses that much, but if I did, that would be what I would give myself. That just means that you're having some dread, you're having some thoughts, you might be sweating, you might have a hard time breathing a little bit, you might just be freaking out, you might get clammy. There's a lot of different things that could happen to you. And typically with generalized anxiety disorder, a lot of things like this, it depends on the duration of time. If you're experiencing this every single day, then we kind of want to intervene, right? But if it happens every once in a while, that's okay too. All of it's okay, but it's really, you want to monitor how that's happening for you, especially if you have kids. If you're thinking about yourself, you're like, I've been struggling like this now for 6 months, 8 months, 6 years, 10 years. It's good to note that. Another one is social anxiety disorder. Do you know anybody that's like, that's too much peopling for me? Too many people will be there? Too much is happening. I saw a friend today and I asked her a question. She had just gotten back from New York City, and that's one of my favorite places. And only below certain streets do I love New York City. But when you go there, you have to be ready. Like the first time I ever visited there, I would have to go to my hotel in the afternoon to just regroup because it's a lot of people. So I asked her, I said, hey, how was your trip to New York? She goes, that was a lot of people. And she has social anxiety. So for her, it was like pressing on her, people wanting to talk to her, a lot of stimulation. You might find that. You might find people can have a great conversation with you one-on-one, but when you get them in an or one-on-one, but you get them in a party or some big setting, they're like, oh my gosh, I'm freaking out. Or you might see them standing in the corner, where normally if you had a conversation with them, it wouldn't be like that. So they're struggling with social anxiety. Another one is panic disorder. This one is if you have panic attacks or if you find yourself struggling in that way. So I always tell people this because it was the best statistic or the best fact I've ever heard about panic attacks. I'm going to put you on the spot for a second. And if it's okay, and you don't have to, but I'd love it. Is anyone in here struggled or ever had a panic attack? You know what? Thanks for your bravery. Oh my God. Can we give them a hand? Because that's not easy to like raise your hand and say you've had that. Okay. So one of the things about, I'm going to ask this actually. And the other campuses, you can participate too. Just because I can't hear you doesn't mean you don't play along, okay? So those of you who raised your hand, can you throw out one word to describe what a panic attack might feel like for you? Panic. All the same time. That really was a good exercise. I really planned that out. Planned that really well. Suffocation. Heart attack. Dread. Claustrophobic. Fear. Out of control. Okay, look at this. You guys are amazing. Okay, that is like, so I actually wish, my dream research always is to do like a social study of real people, because sometimes when they do these assessments and stuff, I'm like, who do you ask these questions to? Because they literally are not the people that I talk to all the time. But I love to know how it really feels for you, because I think that is a more clear description of what it would be like. But the actual event of a panic attack is a mere seconds. But it's the residual effects of what it does to you and how you feel about it that keep on going. So I've had clients and people that I've known that sometimes it's days before they're able to recover from a panic attack because they actually can't get themselves back regulated after that event happens in their body. And so when you have somebody with panic disorder, they're going to struggle with having panic attacks. To be honest, I've had 2 in my life. I don't ever care to have them ever again. Thank you very much. I hope you hear, because I don't want that. But for people who struggle with them a lot, I have such empathy, because I'm like, they were really challenging. And you already think you have a loss of control, right? When you have a little bit of anxiety, then imagine having your body just take over and you don't have any control of that too. That's really, really frustrating. So I have a lot of empathy for people who have panic attacks. And if that's you, I just want you to know you're not alone. And obviously you saw how many people raised their hand. And I just want you to know that there are other people who get how you feel. And one of the things I love about your church is they have such a great ministry to talk to you. There are people out there that can talk to you. What do you call them? Coaches? Advocates. And I just think that's so cool that your church has people that you can meet with and that you can connect with. And if that's something you struggle with, they didn't tell me to do this, but I'm giving a little shameless plug, because it's cool that you have people that will meet with you and talk you through this if you have that. Another one is specific phobias. So I may be in this, snakes might be one. I mean, there's some people who have specific phobias of certain things that they just, some of the major ones are public speaking and flying. So like you'll see people who just this very thing that's very specific. I have this businessman who is quite successful, and that man drives himself everywhere. Like I'm talking wherever he has to go in the country, he plans and he will drive himself because he will not get on a plane. We're working on it, but he will not get on a plane. Another one is obsessive compulsive disorder. Again, thank you. Raise your hand. I could be in this category a little bit. I like order. I try to be good with it, but sometimes OCD gets a bad rap. Like people will say to you, stop being OCD. If you know someone who really has OCD, you know somebody who really has OCD, because you're going to know, right? Everything kind of is lined up. There's certain things that really have to be specific way. You'll see a lot of hand washing in kids. There's a lot of different characteristics of it, but that's where you really need your environment to be in order. So I don't think that I necessarily have the full-blown diagnosis of it, but because I grew up with all the trauma growing up, I really value order. It's really important to me, right? I grew up in a lot of chaos. So when I have order, my body, my brain, my spirit, everything is like, okay, I'm okay, right? So I can find that I teeter a little bit on wanting things to be in order. My spice drawer is organized. I mean, I like that. Like, that makes me excited to, like, sort things into categories. Don't judge. It's real life. So I did talk already a little bit about COVID and about how our predictability and our control were altered in COVID. And so I think even now, what I find is I call it the hiccup effect. Have you ever had the hiccups? Everyone should say yes to that. And so when you have the hiccups and then you're, like, about to have another hiccup and you're, like, waiting, and then it comes, right? So like, and you think they're gone and you're hanging on and you're like, maybe, and then another one comes, right? That's how I feel like we're living as a nation, is that in some ways we experience this moment in time. And I think all of us are like, is it going to come again, right? And so we're living on this precipice, like this edge of what might happen next. And so I think that's why we're seeing anxiety on the rise, because living in that state of fight or flight. And if you're familiar with that at all, and if you're a therapist, you're going to be like, oh my gosh, this girl is giving some whack statistics, or I'm really not giving you whack statistics, but I'm giving you just very vague definitions, not on purpose, but because I want to get to a lot of things for you tonight. But I think that in that, it's just so important that we figure out how we gain control, right? We have to learn that about ourselves. I totally lost my train of thought of what I was going to tell you, and that's ADD, because I have that for sure. That's a diagnosis. So I'll find that train, and I'll get back on in just a minute when I remember what I was going to tell you about predictability and control. Oh, that's what I'm telling you, fight or flight. I'm okay. I saw clients today and came here, and yes, so here I am. But the one thing that we do is we can't live in fight or flight. So how they describe fight or flight is if you imagine you're in the jungle and all of a sudden a tiger is up behind you. Every ounce of your body is like, run! Like everything inside of you is every organ, every bit, every cell is about getting away from the tiger. But what we've done in our culture is we've created that fight or flight scenario every day. So can you imagine every bit of your body living in that space perpetually? It's not healthy for us, which is why my passion is to help people get to the root of their anxiety so that they're able to eradicate it from their life if possible, and however it means we've got to work through. So I'm back on track. Don't worry. All right, another piece is genetics and environment. So I told you a little bit about my growing up, right? A lot of this can be a factor that contributes to anxiety. So if you've ever heard people say nature or nurture, or the chicken or the egg, like kind of those arguments, right? It's like, are you born genetically predisposed for anxiety, or does your environment create anxiety? I would like to say both. So I had a grandmother who I love, and I attribute a lot of who I am as a person to her, but she was anxiety in a human body. Like she literally, like you would drop something and she'd be like, are you okay? And you'd be like, I just dropped the remote to the TV. You're like, everything to her was, she lived through the depressions. She was just very like on edge all the time. So a lot of my anxious tendencies do come from her sometimes, where I remember being a kid and we would just do something and she would like panic, you know? But I also think that some of it is environment. So I grew up with a lot of chaos, right? So anxiety, my mom would probably disagree, but anxiety lives in that space, right? So you have to think about that for yourself, and I challenge you to think about that for yourself. What was it like for you growing up? Do you have people around you that you may have seen, and you saw them behave anxiously, and that's what our kids learn. And one of my passions in getting well for myself and why I have a therapist is because I don't want my daughter to repeat negative patterns. I would love to break those generational curses and that generational stuff with me so that she doesn't have to contend with, well, this is how my mom dealt with it. She would panic all the time. And she'll tell me now, she'll be like, chill out, Mom, chill out. It's okay, Mom, chill out, okay. And so it's like, when she starts saying stuff like that, I'm like, okay, I've got to like bring it down because she's watching me. Even at 9, like she's watching me. People call her my mini-me, and it kind of some days I'm like, that's super sweet. Then other days I'm like, oh my gosh, help. Another one is physical symptoms. So let me tell you a little bit about what physically it looks like. You might have heart palpitations, so you might feel your heart start to race a little bit. One of the things that I love to recommend to people who I work with that struggle with anxiety is some type of device to monitor your heart rate. So some people will wear an Apple Watch. I don't have it on right now, but I wear an Oura Ring. I track my sleep with, it's a kind of like an Apple Watch, but it's really good for you to be able to look at what's happening. So if I go back to my day, if I wore my Oura Ring or my Apple Watch all day, I'd be like, what's happening at 2 and at 4? Oh, at 2 and at 4, I have this meeting, or at 3, or at 6. Oh, at 6 o'clock, I'm making dinner and everybody's getting home. So you're able to look and see, what does your heart rate look like? So this helps you kind of be able, again, knowledge is power. The more knowledge we have about what's going on with us, the more power we have over it. Another thing is headaches. I'll see a lot of people with headaches. I worked on a National Institute of Health study where I studied jaw clenching, jaw pain. So many people will have headaches because they clench like this when they're stressed out and they just hold their jaw, and then it's like all the muscles in their jaw get clenched. So the research study that I worked on actually was that people went through therapy and they believed that mental health intervention would actually work with jaw pain. So you might have headaches from that, from clenching. Sometimes when you just furrow your brow and you're really thinking about something, that might be something that you'll experience. Muscle tension, so where you feel like your body is just all like tight and you just feel like you can't relax. Another one is dizziness. You might feel like you're just lightheaded or things like where you just won't be able to get your balance. You feel like you might pass out. And another one is gastrointestinal stuff. So I cannot tell you the number of clients who will go to the GI doctor or they'll go somewhere and start getting things looked at when in all reality it's anxiety. So I always feel like the least restrictive thing, it's probably from my days of teaching, but like how do we start with something that's less and then work our way up? So even when people come see me if you came to see me for anxiety, you'd be like, do I need medicine? I'd be like, okay, first, let's rewind. Let's start. Hi, let's meet. Tell me about your family. Tell me about your life. And then we'll see. Okay, if that's not relieving your symptoms, then we go to the next thing and the next thing and the next thing. One thing that you're probably going to want to punch me in the face, especially all of you back there from the student section, but it's like social media and all of the bombardment of our phones. I did a talk on it on the anxious generation it was at Parent Connection. And After that, I started deep diving even more, which made me mad but happy, right? Like, so I'm digging and digging. It makes my daughter livid. Like, she wants a phone at 9 and I just laugh, and it's really not a good scene. But I just think there's so much input for us, even for myself. Like, I will be like, how many hours, how many minutes, how many days do I spend on my phone? But what that's done is it's affected our dopamine. So when you think about your reward center, what's happening when you're on your phone and you're watching a cool TikTok, or you're doing something, you're getting text messages, you're posting something to Instagram, you're reading something online, is you're getting a quick dopamine hit. And the issue is we've made the curve up and down so quick that we're searching for the next high so fast that we barely come down from the one before it. So it's really crucial to our nervous system that we allow ourselves to detox. So one of the things that I wish I did better, there was a long season where I would just really put my phone away on Sundays. I would just really say, okay, even if it's just for a few hours, just say I'm not even going to touch it. Because if it's there, I'm going to go through the whole, right, there's a sequence. I don't know about you. Mine's text, email, Instagram. Like, you go through all the things and you check this next thing, and, you just keep going through. The last thing I already talked about, and I want to read you a scripture that the Lord gave me. It's Matthew 6:25 through 34. But this one relates to keeping up with the Joneses. I already told you I don't like those people. I'm sorry to say. But I feel like our culture has become so caught up in keeping up with what the neighbor is doing. And I think as I've grown and as I've studied and as I've done more and more, I've realized there's such a fallacy because it's a never-ending journey. It's something that we're always going to chase, but I find that it puts people in an anxious position so frequently because you're looking around and you're seeing what they have, you're seeing what they're doing, you're seeing the vacation they're on, you're seeing whatever it is they're wearing, you're seeing how their kids are acting, you're seeing what house they're building or what car they're driving. And what that is I think that's the present keeping us from the present. Because we're not able to see the things that we have because we're too busy seeing what they have. And I want to read you the scripture. It's a little bit long, but I hope you don't mind. It's God's word, so we're here in church. We can do it. It's Matthew 6:25 through 34. If you decide for God, living a life of God worship, it follows that you don't fuss about what's on the table at mealtimes or whether the clothes in your closet are in fashion. There's far more to your life than the food you put in your stomach, more to your outer appearance than the clothes you hang on your body. Look at the birds, free and unfettered, not tied down to a job description, careless in the care of God, and you count far more to Him than birds. Has anyone by fussing in front of the mirror ever gotten taller by so much as an inch? All this time and money wasted on fashion, do you think it makes that much difference? Instead of looking at the fashions, walk out into the fields and look at the wildflowers. They never primp or shop, but have you ever seen color and design quite like it? The 10 best-dressed men and women in the country look shabby alongside them. If God gives such attention to the appearance of wildflowers, most of which are never seen, don't you think He'll attend to you, take pride in you, do His best for you? What I'm trying to do here is get you to relax, not to be so preoccupied with getting, so you can respond to God's giving. People who don't know God and the way He works fuss over these things, but you know both God and how He works. Steep your life in God reality, God initiative, God provisions. Don't worry about missing out. You'll find all your everyday human concerns will be met. Give your entire attention to what God is doing right now, and don't get worked up about what may or may not happen tomorrow. God will help you deal with whatever hard things come up when the time comes. I just love that scripture because there's so often where I think to myself, are you here? Do you hello? Like, do you see what's happening? And we talk like that. I mean, I'm kind of pretty honest with the Lord. But there's just some times when I feel like, are you even paying attention? Do you see my bank account? Do you see what's going on? Do you see what's happening at work? Do you see how these people are treating me? And I think so often we forget of all the goodness that He's done for us. And one of the things that I'll do when my daughter comes home and complains, I'm like, tell me 3 things that were good that happened today. I'm like, we got to get in the space of gratitude, especially at this time of year. It's always so good. But I think it's good to stay there because you can't stay in a funk when you think about the gratitude that you have for the things that you have, the people that you have, and the circumstances you have. Okay, now we're going to do a few things, okay? Everybody still with me? We're still good on time. Are you texting your questions? There's the number. It's somewhere. Do you want me to tell it? 817-482-3613. Don't forget other campuses. We want to hear from you too. It's not just for the folks here. Please, we want everybody to get a chance to get free therapy. It's important. Okay, so what do? Right? We've talked all about this. We've sat in it for a second. Now what? Okay? So you might have heard me say this before, but I have this analogy. Have you ever seen one of those Chinese finger traps? You know why I know about these? Because I've been to Chuck E. Cheese. I've been to Dave & Buster's. I've been to all the places, and I have paid $50 for one of those. Have you ever paid $50? Because I have, literally. Like, you pay $50, you get all those stinking tickets, and then what do you get? A Chinese finger trap at the end. That's real life. But what they look like is if you've ever seen one, you don't pull, you push. And I think so often what we do with anxiety is we are trying to pull ourselves out of it rather than lean into it. So that probably sounds weird, right? For a therapist to be like, lean into your anxiety, just embrace it, it's so great. No, I know it's not great. But sometimes what we need to do is we need to stop and we need to listen to what our spirit's saying, what our heart's saying, what our mind's saying, what our body is saying. And we need to let's think about, okay, what is that? Where is that? Where do I feel it in my body? I'm trained in EMDR, which is a very cool modality if you're not familiar. But what it does is it basically recreates REM sleep while you're awake so that you can clear out the junk in your trunk, is kind of how I say it. No, that's a very much a Cassie speak. Anybody who's trained in EMDR is probably like, that was the worst definition of EMDR, but that's kind of what it is. So you're wanting to clear all this stuff out of your brain, but one of the first things you do with someone who brings something to you that they want to get rid of is you make them pay attention to their body. What emotions are you feeling? I am a huge believer of feelingswheel.com. If my friends know, if I say, how are you? And they say, fine, I'll be like, that's not on the wheel. Go back to the wheel. You got to give me a real emotion. Fine is not a real emotion, right? So it's so cool for your kids. If you look at it too, if you've ever seen one, they're amazing because it gives you all of these words for sad, all of these words for mad, right? There's 80-something emotions, and we function typically in 2 to 3 of them. So if we can name what we're feeling, I'm not sad, I'm disappointed. I'm frustrated. I'm angry. I'm irritated. I'm hungry. Hot and hungry for me. It's bad. Bad scene. But what we need to do is we need to lean into that. So what happens, though, is if we don't take assessment, I feel like I say things come out sideways, right? Have you ever squeezed something hoping that you'll get it out the front and then it comes out the side? So I will tell people all the time, I'm like, if you would have just addressed that directly, you wouldn't have had such a mess. But what happened was you tried not to address that directly and everything shot out the sides. Kind of like even a shaken 7-Up bottle. If you've ever had a soda and you've shaken it up and then if you try to open the lid, it's going everywhere. How many of us are walking around just like that? Rather than dealing with something directly, we think no one knows, we're fine. All the while, we're spewing on everyone because they can see on our face, in our action, in our tone, and how we're responding. So lean into that. Okay, let's try something else. I'm going to have you do this with me, all the campuses. Okay, this is called the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 method. So what we also want to do with anxiety is we want to bring ourselves in the present. Remember I told you that sometimes we could go backwards, sometimes we go forwards, and we miss right now. And sometimes we're even so caught up in the present. So what this is we're going to do it together as a group, okay? So I'm going to just give you a second. Just follow along with me. It's not hard. You can do it. Everybody can do it. I want you right now, just in your brain, to find 5 things you can see. Just look around. Like I see my paper, see the table, see some shoes, see a chair, see a light, okay? All right, now I want you to think about 4 things you can touch. I can touch this paper, I can touch the chair, I can touch my hair, right? Like you can touch 4 things. I want you to think about 3 things you can hear. You can hear. 3 things you can hear. Okay? I want you to think about 2 things you can smell. Hopefully it's nothing bad. 2 things you can smell. And 1 thing you can taste. Might be the gum you're chewing, might be dinner, might be the water you're drinking or soda or something, right? So what that does is that brings you totally present, right? Like when you were thinking about those things, you couldn't think about something else. You're thinking about, so if you're ever stressed, just think about it. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Just stop yourself. 5 things you can see, 4 things you can touch, 3 things you can hear, 2 things you can smell, and 1 thing you can taste. So all of those things will bring your body back in regulation. If I have someone that I'm working with a really severe trauma, that is one of the techniques that I use to bring them back into the moment so that they're here with me in the space. All right, let's try something else. So that's mindfulness, right? What do we do? I'm going to give you categories because I can be all over. You saw me already lose my train once, so let's come back. Mindfulness and prayer is another one. Praying about things, right? Like being able to just focus and take it to the Lord and say, I love a good list. I won't lie. Like, it's nice if I can make a list. Like, I'll be like, Lord, 1, 2. Like, I can kind of write it down. It kind of helps me out. Another one is breathing. Okay, so you've probably heard people say, take a deep breath. Don't tell somebody that. It really is not, like, it's hard, right? Like, people might want to punch you in the eye if you tell them when they're having a hard time. But you could tell them how to breathe, right? The first thing is we breathe like this normally. That doesn't help. Anybody had a panic attack? Does that help you? Usually no, right? Because it's like you're only limiting your lung capacity. But I took voice lessons for a very long time, and if you've ever been a singer or done anything, you breathe from your diaphragm. So what you want to do is you want to breathe and like almost make your hand come out. So I want everybody to try it. So I want you to put your hand right here, and I want you to try to keep your shoulders, I'm bad at doing it while I'm trying to talk. I want you to keep your shoulders as still as possible while you try to push your hand out. So what that does is that's putting air in the very depths of you rather than have you breathing just from the top of your lungs, which is so shallow. Another thing I want to teach you is what they call square breathing. Has anyone done this before? Some people might have done this. Okay, so you think about it as a square, right? So we're going to inhale for 4. We're going to hold it for 4. We're going to exhale for 4, and we're going to wait for 4, okay? So let's do it together. We're going to inhale for 4. Exhale for 4. Wait, I forgot. Do you love how human I am? I'm so human. I'm so glad. Okay, let's try it again. Ready? We're going to inhale for 4. Hold it for 4. Exhale for 4. Wait for 4. Let's do it again. Inhale for 4. Hold it for 4. Exhale for 4. Wait for 4. Okay, so what that does is, again, same thing, makes you focus, right? You're focusing on what that feels like if you do it right. So that's another one to try when you get in a tough spot. Okay, so we've got mindfulness, prayer, breathing. Another one is challenging negative thoughts. This is one of my favorite things to do. So, okay, Bree, I'm going to pick on you. Can you tell me a problem that you might, you're like, what am I doing? I don't know either. We're just going to wing it. They've seen my humanity in all ways, so we're just going to keep going. Can you just tell me a small problem that maybe you might face? A lot of, okay, I love it. Perfect. That was me on the way here. Bree's calling me. Are you coming? Okay, a lot of traffic. So I love to play the then what game. Okay, Bree, so you get in a lot of traffic, then what? You might be late, and then what? Oh, they'd be upset with you, and then what? And then you'd be uncomfortable, and then what? And then you talk about it, and then what? And then what? You wouldn't worry again about traffic, right? Or maybe not, right? So what happens so often is we start with a thought and we don't finish it. We don't go all the way to the end, right? Like that when I do this with clients, the very thing that they're afraid of, and I would even have said in that scenario, which you did phenomenal, by the way, Bree, thank you. But it's like, I would have been like, I might lose my job, right? And then I wouldn't have money. Like, this is me. Like, I mean, I could literally go from 0 to 100 really quickly. I might lose my job, and then I won't have money, and then I have to sell my house, and I have to sell my car, and then I'm going to be living under a bridge in a box. Like, it's like that's where I would go, right? Just from being in traffic. So if you allow people to go all the way to the end, it really helps take the mystery, right? Knowledge is power. The enemy wants us to believe a lie, which is the thing, right? That you're going to be in trouble, you're going to make somebody upset, and you might lose your job. When in reality, that's not true, right? If you take it all the way to the end, you're going to have a conversation, it's going to be great, and they're going to be like, sorry about that. That must have been a really crappy morning, right? So you finish it out. Not every time, but we hope. So sometimes we fantasize about the worst, making it bigger than reality. And another thing that we can watch out for, I'm almost done, and then we're going to get ready for your questions, is diet, caffeine, and sugar. Guilty is charged. But caffeine, right? Like if you imagine, that's an upper. Another thing that I tell people a lot of times who struggle with anxiety is exercise. Again, you might want to punch me in the face, but there's so much that happens for us when we release the endorphins in our body. Like the Lord built our system, it's so kick butt, our body. Like what he created, our brain, all the nuances, how everything functions together. So when we move, there's things that go on in the chemical makeup of our brain that are so important. Another thing is routine. We need a routine. Our bodies crave that sometimes. Does that mean everything has to be regimented? No. But does a routine help? Like, I don't know if you have kids, but my daughter needs a routine, right? Like, it helps her. She knows what's next. She knows what's coming. This is what she has to do before bed. Another one is relaxation. Sometimes it's good that we have different techniques. So you can look, and there's passive relaxation techniques. It's really actually very cool. I used this a ton when I worked for the NIH. And what you do is you clench your muscles and release them, but someone will walk you through that. I've actually looked, I believe, on YouTube. So you can find some that are like 10 minutes, 15 minutes, 5 minutes. It's so good, even in your car. It's like you can do it while you're driving. You clench your muscles and let them go so that your body feels the difference between being tight and being loose. Another one, I told you I wear that Oura ring. I've been working on my sleep for a hot minute, but sleep is crucial. We spend half our lives, or not really half, but it feels like it, a lot of time asleep, right? Like we sleep so many hours a day, but so many people are getting poor sleep. And there's such a restorative nature. Remember I told you that EMDR works like REM sleep to clear out the junk in your brain? That's exactly what we're missing. When we're not sleeping, we're missing the opportunity for ourselves to clear out God's way what we faced that day. Have you ever had the dreams where you've been like, I dreamed of a Slurpee and an octopus and a bow and arrow, right? And you're like, why? But then you're like, oh yeah, I saw a commercial for a Slurpee. I was talking about an octopus. You know, like you think about those things. That's how your brain fleshes that stuff and flushes that stuff out of your body. Another thing is we're built for connection with other people. So often I find people with anxiety, it doesn't mean you have to go against your social anxiety, but we're built for relationships. We're built to come together. Like even on Sunday, coming to church, there's something about that, about people seeing you, about people shaking your hand, saying hello to you. That's such an important thing. Letting it out, journaling. I know people are like, wah, 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 but there's such power to that, right? Like to be able to just be like, I am so upset. You just get it out. It's like getting it out of your body and it's putting it, again, knowledge is power. I'm going to say it over and over. But when you put something down like that, you're actually identifying what you might be afraid of, what you might be worrying about, what might be going on in your mind. Healthy boundaries. Those are so important when you have anxiety. If somebody makes you more anxious, you got to set a boundary, right? Like there's some people, I have a great friend and I love her. She lives in my neighborhood, but it's like I can only take her in small doses. Like it's like she can sometimes make me a little more anxious. And I'm like, okay, and I'm done. Like I have to go now because you're just, all this is happening and I'm feeling some kind of thing and I got to leave, you know? So it just depends on what you need and you need to set healthy boundaries. Talk to a professional. Small plug, but it's real. Like someone objective looking at your situation is so powerful because I don't go home with you. I don't know your spouse or your partner. I don't know your kids, but I'm able to look at all the situation and say, maybe have you thought about, or what have you ever considered, or what I hear you saying is, I'm able to look at that from an objective perspective. Does that mean you're in therapy for the rest of your life? No. It really just means that maybe for this scenario, it's good to have another set of eyes. Sometimes it's important to look at what's in your control. Sometimes this is what I love to do with kids. Okay, what are you the boss of? I'm the boss of what I wear. I'm the boss of my snack. I'm the boss of where I sit. I'm the boss, right? So you want to feel empowered. Just like kids want to feel empowered, so do we. I want to feel empowered. I want to feel like that I am the boss of something in my life, especially on days when I feel like I'm the boss of nothing. What needs attention right now? Remember we talked about pre-worrying. So what needs attention right now? Let's make a list, right? Like I could go ahead and be like already worrying about Christmas. Like what, oh my gosh, I need to start shopping. What cookies am I going to make? Like what am I going to do? But I'm like, hold on a second. It's Tuesday. I just got to get, tomorrow's Wednesday. Like let's just get that solved and then we can think about that, right? Go easy on yourself. God gives us grace, so why don't we? Like I think sometimes I'll hold myself to a standard of shame. Like, I want to make a shirt that says, stop shoulding yourself. I said should, stop shoulding yourself. Because I think we should ourselves so often, right? It's like, you should, well, I should. And I have some friends who'd be like, is that a good reason to go? Is that a good reason? Just because you think you should? And so I want to make a shirt like that. And the last thing I'll leave you with, and if you haven't sent your questions in, I think they're finalizing the list, so get it in when I can, is one of the things that I've researched personally is one of the biggest things you can do to combat worry and anxiety is to lean into your dreams and your purpose. When you know who you are and you know what you're supposed to be doing next, and I don't mean 10 steps ahead, I mean the next step. When you ask the Lord, what do you want me to do tomorrow? What do you want me to do next month? What did you make me for? The Lord put me on this planet to synthesize the clinical and the spiritual and to teach others to do the same. Like, I know that. Like, I have tried to be a realtor so many times, and I can't. My students even bought me a book. They were like, how to be a realtor, a guide to being a realtor. I just can't do it. No offense to realtors, we all need you, but like, that's literally, I keep thinking I'm gonna shift and do a different career. But I haven't been able to do that. And so, because I know I'm put on this planet to synthesize the clinical and the spiritual. And I feel like maybe for you, there's been a season that you've forgotten what the Lord's called you to. You've maybe had a dream before and you lost it somewhere along the way. You didn't really lose it, you just misplaced it for a second. But ask him, why did you put me on this planet? What's my purpose? What's a dream that's deep inside of you that maybe you haven't touched in a while? Did he call you to write a book? Did he call you to start a group? Did he call you to be an advocate? Did he call you to take care of your kids? Did he call you to bake cakes? I don't know. But whatever it is, that is always something. And I don't use the word always very often. I'm kind of anti the word always. But that is always something that's going to bring us up to a higher place and a higher purpose. And it's going to allow us to lean into something healthy instead of leaning into something unhealthy. So I think Bree and Roger are going to join me now. And we're going to answer the questions. Did we get questions? A lot? Yay! Way to go. I could be the Target lady. Did you like that? That kind of sounded a little like, have you guys seen that commercial where she's like, approved? It's like my favorite.
All right. You guys were amazing on the questions. We got so many questions that I think we could go a whole week answering these. I mean, we got a ton of them and really good questions here. And hey, by the way, let's give it up for Dr. Cassie Reid.
Thank you.
We have such a variety of questions that it's really hard to figure out which one to start at. And so, really...
Give it to Bree. She loves hard questions.
Here,
she can't wait.
she can't. I think she told me she wanted you to start it off on it.
I'm sure she did. Depends on the question.
We got some really good ones. And here's one I want to start with from Hazlitt is, how can I handle my social anxiety when it starts to border on a panic attack? This happens a couple of times a week due to PTSD from an abusive relationship.
As Bree looks at me. Well, first, I'm so sorry because that stinks. And I'm sorry that you're struggling with that because no one wants to feel that way ever. Honestly, after studying EMDR, I highly, highly, highly recommend that because the PTSD, you have to think there's a root of it, right? Like you experience, and not just with this story, but you experience something that happens to you that then kind of forms a pathway in your brain of how you expect things to be. And then it's kind of like the hiccup situation, right? Like, and now I'm going to go into this social situation and I'm going to feel that same feeling. I'm going to have the panic attack or I'm going to feel this way. So my suggestion is to really consider professional counseling that includes EMDR. So the beauty of EMDR is you can sometimes, most of the time, do about 15 sessions worth of talk therapy in 1 to 2 sessions of EMDR. So it's not something typically that you're doing a ton, but you're able to target something very specific. So in this story, it'd be like the PTSD. You're going to target what caused the PTSD to help your body get that kind of fleshed out. And then in that moment, hopefully, and then the other thing I would suggest for social anxiety is gradual doses. Sometimes that's not possible, but sort of a ramp up thing, right? Like if you have social anxiety, try a dinner with just 1 or 2 friends at a maybe chill restaurant, and the next time you might try 3 or 4 friends at a little busier restaurant. You're just slowly ramping up so you're not putting yourself at a 500-person Christmas party for your first outing.
We have a lot of questions that are really asking, how do I communicate to my loved ones that I really am suffering from anxiety, panic attacks? Not only how can I tell them, but also how can I help them to understand what I'm feeling? Because a lot of them would say they just think it's in my head, they just think it's not real, I'm overreacting. So how can they really communicate that well? And one of the things you brought up is how, because this is question 2, how do I establish healthy boundaries with that?
Where you got this?
Yeah. This is so challenging because if you're talking to a loved one who doesn't experience anxiety, we need to get to a place where we're speaking the same language. And so me explaining, I'll tell you, I do struggle with anxiety and my husband doesn't. So we've walked through this together, and I can't just explain what the physical sensation is in my body, because he's like, okay, well, just do this thing that will remove that from your body and you'll be good. And if you struggle with anxiety, you know that it's never that simple. So what I've tried to do, and what I suggest a lot of people do, is try and find a way that you guys can get on the same page. So I have asked the question, what's a situation that you are probably at your height of stress? The thing that makes you most uncomfortable, where you feel a little, maybe your palms are sweaty, maybe your heart is racing. What would you label that as at a scale of 1 to 10? And he might say, I guess that's an 8 for me. Okay, that's my baseline. That's how I feel when I'm at a 3 on my scale. And that's helpful because when I get into a situation that increases that anxiety, you can imagine how much an 8 feels to me. Does that make sense?
That's a phenomenal way. I love how you describe that because it puts it in context for all to understand. Mm-hmm. That's so good. Mm-hmm. I think just to address the boundaries thing, I heard this said one time, and I think this might be a good way for you to think about it, like how she's describing, have them tell you what their 8 is or what a high intense thing is. So I told you I do have ADD. You watched me kind of lose my train of thought. So if you've ever been driving and you don't know how to get where you're going, and the radio's up really loud, your kids might be screaming in the back seat, and there's someone blaring their horn next to you, like that feeling, right, of all those inputs at the same time, that's how ADD feels on the daily. It's like you're in that environment perpetually having that. So with anxiety, like I said, no 2 people experience it the same. So like what her husband might think is a stressful situation is her 3. So is allowing them to understand, this is how it feels in my body. This is what I think in my mind. This is how it feels when my heart feels. This is how my hands feel. This is how my armpits feel. This is how I just want to jump out of my skin. It feels like things are crawling all over me and I just want to run away. And the more descriptors you can give them, the more understanding hopefully they will have for your situation. And as far as boundaries, if you find people are increasing your level of anxiety or situations are increasing, it's so crucial that you limit time with them. And you may not say, you make me anxious, I don't want to hang out anymore. It might be more like, cool, I'm in a really good headspace. They asked me to go have coffee. I can swing that today. Or, you know what? I had 52 things go wrong today at work. There's no way I'm even going to be able to tolerate 2 sips of coffee with this person. So I'm just going to have to say I'm not up for it. So setting boundaries like that.
That's good. We got just a ton of questions on not only in romantic relationships and those things, but something that really a lot of people have a hard time controlling the environment is in their work situations. And even with in-laws on that. But how do we handle those situations? We walk into an environment, we need to be there, we're getting paid to be there, and then it's really what we would call a toxic environment, how do they put those skills to work?
For me, and Bree, you jump in anytime. I think you have to identify sometimes what the person reminds you of. So typically, when you go into work, it's not that the work situation is the only situation, right? I told you I kind of grew up with a lot of abuse. So when I encounter someone who could potentially be abusive in that way or controlling or do something, I'm triggered. So it has nothing to do necessarily with the boss that I have right then, but it's the thing that it's reminding my body, my brain, my emotions of that happened back then. So sometimes it's stopping and saying, I'll ask the client a lot of times, I'll be like, well, who did they remind you of? And they're like, I don't know. And I'm like, well, think about it. Who do they remind you of? And it's like if they take a second, they're like, oh my gosh, they're just like my aunt. And my aunt would just ride me and be so angry and like whatever it was. So it's like sometimes it's identifying that when it comes to your workplace or like what's going on. Like I grew up with a lot of chaos. I had 16 brothers and sisters, and well, there it is, right? Like you had 16 brothers and sisters, and so your house was always in upheaval. So when you go to the office and there's 16 people running around the cubicles, you feel a little bit like you're back at home and you're not in control. A lot of that really is not in control. But if you think about it in relationships, I would imagine, boiling it down, is that my anxiety is going to cost me more than I want to spend. Meaning, I don't want to lose my partner. I don't want you talk about you and your husband having a healthy conversation. It's like, I think that's really the fear, right? What if they don't understand me? What if this gets to be too much and they leave me? What if this is too much for them to handle? What if they can't hang with me while I'm having a panic attack or while I'm having a bad day or while I can't go to the party? Like, what if I lose them? That's the real fear, right? That's the what if, taking it all the way to the end, to me, in relationships. So I think communicating to them and sometimes just saying to someone, I wish I could be at your 3, but I don't want to lose you. So how can I help you understand my 3 and my 8 and my 10 and my 12? Because I don't want to lose you. You matter to me, and I don't want this to be something that costs us our marriage, our relationship, our friendship.
Yeah, I would add to that she keeps saying knowledge is power. It is for our relationships too. So these people in our lives want to help us. They want us to be successful. Your boss, your coworkers want you to be successful. If we share a little knowledge with them, they can possibly help us. Obviously, we use that carefully, right? But if we have a continuous interaction with our boss, where when they approach us in a certain way, we feel that instant trigger because they remind me of someone in my past. I don't have to tell them the whole backstory, right? You remind me of my dad, and this is why that's really unhelpful. Let's not go there. But let's say, okay, I really, really want to do a good job. Sometimes I feel like I do best when I have a little more notice for this deadline that's coming up. Or when working with a coworker, hey, sometimes I really love talking and I love catching up. I'm going to actually head back to my cubicle for me to actually get this work done, and then let's catch up. Communicating your needs is really going to help people meet those, right? And that's part of boundaries too. Boundaries sound scary, and sometimes we're very, very nervous that it will lead to cutoff if we do that. But boundaries are just a way for us to be in relationship with other people in a safer way, and everybody wants that, even the people on the other side of that interaction.
I remember being in a situation like that and hiding almost underneath the conference table, doing like little breathing exercises, and it worked. It works. So, but hey, here's a great question, and it's kind of going in a place where I think a lot of us, as parents, is you talked about this, is we don't want to continue to push these things onto our kids. And this comes from Northlake. Is I struggle with depression and anxiety. Both my parents also had struggled with these too. I see it in our everyday actions, and I worry about pushing these mental health struggles onto my child unintentionally. What is a good tip on how to keep from pushing these mental health issues down to future generations?
I want you to answer this, Bree. I think you probably have a good answer.
Well, I related to so much of what you shared about your relationship with your daughter as well. As I mentioned, I do struggle with anxiety. I've struggled with it for as long as I can remember. And my daughter's 4.5, and I'm already seeing these tendencies with her. They show up in such small ways when they're young. And I have so many fears about her living out her life in some of the ways that I have. But the power is, I've lived through it. I've gone to a lot of therapy myself. I have learned these tools and these tricks that help me through. I'm going to start teaching her at 4. I'm going to walk through this with her, help her feel like she's not alone. I tell her all the time, I feel really nervous when I'm in a big group of people too. And we talk through these things at the young age that she is in a way that's appropriate for her. And the thing that all of us probably, if you were raised in the 90s or earlier, mental health was not something that we talked about in our childhood. Not for any lack of trying or care from our parents, it just wasn't a thing. We are in a generation where we have so much information, we have these tools, we get to learn these things to pass them on to our kids, and it's hard for me not to see it as a weakness because I don't want to pass it to her, but who better to raise someone who struggles with anxiety than someone who struggles with anxiety? Because I'm walking through it daily with her, and she will not feel alone. And I think you said a little bit of that with your daughter as well.
No, that's so true. And I think one of the things that I always tell parents is don't be afraid to be honest with your kids. Like, one of my favorite things to do is I realize now is to tell my daughter I'm sorry. Like showing her what a true apology looks like. It's like, I don't know about you, but there's a lot of my life where I didn't see that happen. I didn't see my parents ever say, hey, I'm sorry I did that, or hey, I'm sorry it was like that. So now it's like, hey, I lost it. I'm really sorry. That was not okay. Mom was not okay. Mom should have not talked to you like that. I shouldn't have said that to you. Will you forgive me? And to be able to model that. But I think more than that, it's like, Mom's freaking out a little bit. And you know what that feels like? My heart kind of races, and it's probably silly, but I just want you to know, I'm having a moment. But even if you go back to the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, your kids can do that. But the breathing thing I love to do with kids is you smell the flowers and you blow out the candles. So you can teach them in their language how to breathe. They can even learn the square. Let's do the square, right? Kids can do that stuff. And it's really powerful that they learn the techniques now. You're teaching her how she can stay ahead of that and not have that be something that she has to figure it out. You're going to teach her the tricks and tips.
You talk about the feeling wheel and how vital that is. That's something that we have actually posted all over our house because that's something that a lot of kids need as parents. We grow up with that. We can learn to help our kids to start identifying these feelings and start working them through them. I know my 16-year-old daughter, we start feeling something, we start talking about that. What are you feeling? And usually I just get, bruh. We just get, because they're so used to it that just start talking. Dad, I know what I'm feeling. Dad. Yeah, it sucks. I'm not doing that. So, but that's a really helpful tool, is that everyone should have that feeling wheel. Go put it around, put it all over your house, because it will really change the trajectory of your kids' lives, learning how to have that tool in their toolbox.
Ours is on the fridge. I said, go to the fridge and figure out how you're feeling.
Yeah, get that
Go let me know.
Yeah, go pick it out.
This isn't working for me.
Yeah, we have an anger wheel too. Oh yeah, so they can identify the anger, and if I see them go to the anger, I just walk out. I'm not dealing with this, so no. So, but get your mother. So, but here's one that we're getting a lot of is sleep. Is from really right here at North Fort Worth is what happens when we lose sleep due to anxiety. And that awkward 3 a.m., you wake up, everything is going through your mind, your body's wanting to rest, but your mind's not wanting to. So how to get more anxiety due to lack of sleep, and the cycle continues over and over. So what are some tips you guys had to help us sleep better?
I would say, you want to go? Go ahead. I would say first, the passive relaxation thing that I mentioned, that would be a great thing to do before bed. I think there's so much research, and I think it's so true, about getting off of devices or blue light within an hour of sleeping. So if you can't do that, they have blue light blocking glasses that you can wear. I think it's also what's your environment like before bed? You know, I mean, there's so much research on like if you eat a big meal before you go to sleep, or alcohol, or there's just like lots of things that can contribute to keeping your body from shutting down. So it's like, what is a good wind down routine? Is that put on some music? I sleep with a noise machine. I like the dome ones that are like just simple fans inside a little box, and they are amazing. I have them in all my house because it just blocks out, like, you know, if you hear something outside or whatever, you're just able to sleep. And now I have them in my office, and I have to really be careful because I can be conditioned sometimes to be like, okay, it's not bedtime, I'm working, you know, but it's like stuff like that. And I think tracking your sleep is a good thing to do. Trying to brain dump, sometimes journaling, like getting everything out of your mind before you lay down. Sometimes it's putting something on, like there's, you know, some of these things, there's like scripture that they'll just play, like you can start on a podcast or something where it's just scripture being read to you for like 12 hours, or music or something that will just allow you to come down. But I want you to share maybe if you have some things.
Yeah, I just want to point your attention on the handout that you guys have. In that yellow section on the back, what she's talking about right now is sleep hygiene. So sleep hygiene, there's a resource on there where you can go access some tips on what is sleep hygiene, what are some of the basics that she mentioned that I can implement. There's a ton of things, so start with a couple and see how those go. The other thing that I wanted to mention is when you said the 3 a.m. worries, I saw so many heads nodding because we all experience this at some point. Going back to an analogy you used about fighting against this feeling that we have. So when anxiety comes up, I like this analogy of I'm driving my car. Anxiety has determined that they're going to be in the car with me. I have tried to kick them out. I have tried to do everything I can to not have anxiety be in this car. But all that I can do is either continue to fight with this anxiety and spend all of my energy and resources there, or I can accept it and say, I don't really like that you're here, but you're here. So you're along for the ride. You can be here, but you can be in the back seat. And so at 3 a.m., instead of fighting it and worrying, oh, I'm only gonna get 2 hours of sleep by the time my alarm goes off, and then I'm gonna have a terrible day and I'm spiraling, that's actually not gonna help us get back to sleep, right? Having some mantras for yourself that says, you know what? It's 3 a.m. and I'm awake. I could choose to use this time to pray. I could turn on a podcast. I could turn on some music. I can do something that accepts that anxiety's here right now and rest is good. I use that mantra a lot for myself. Even though I'm not sleeping, rest is still good for my body. So find some mantras that are good for you to help avoid that spiral that you get into at that time.
That's good. We've gotten actually a lot of questions on identifying I have anxiety, experiencing panic attacks. How does meds play into all of this? Is that a good thing? Is that a negative thing? How do I know what kind of therapist I need to see? What advice do you have for that person?
Sure. I actually, a lot of people ask me this question about medicine. I am, like I said, the least restrictive, you know, kind of moving forward. I believe in the clinical and the spiritual, and sometimes you'll go somewhere and they'll be like, hey, I was worried. Great, here's the pill. You know, it's like, okay, you kind of get a little bit more context, I think, for that. So that's one thing. But I think you would never tell, this is kind of my analogy, and you could get frustrated with me if you want to, but like, you would never tell a diabetic to eat a half dozen cupcakes, and then from the half dozen cupcakes, don't ever take your insulin. You would never say that to them, right? You'd be like, oh my gosh, you just ate 6 cupcakes, take your insulin, you know? And the same thing with our brain. It's like a lot of people don't want to associate those two things because they want to take those two parts of our body and separate them. Well, your endocrine system does not get special privilege over your brain. Like it shouldn't, right? Remember the scripture that says the eye needs the hand, needs all the parts function together. So that's always what I say when people ask me about it. I'm like, you would never shame someone for needing to take insulin. So I don't think it's healthy to shame someone for needing to take medication to regulate their brain chemicals. There's no difference to me. I think it's so important, though, that just getting on medication isn't going to necessarily solve it all. I'm a big believer, get to the root. Right? If you don't if you don't deal with the root, something else is going to grow. If you've ever pulled a weed in your garden, if you don't get the root fully out, guess what you're going to show up and see the next day is another something growing. So I would say that's important to find a professional, someone who's licensed, someone who has studied anxiety. I have a couple of coaches at my practice, and I don't have anything against them, but if you really want to tackle some PTSD stuff, they're going to refer you to someone like myself or another therapist that's credentialed in EMDR, which is trauma and things that they've walked through. So it's good to look at what the person licensure and what credentialing, if they've been to school, what they carry. And there's a lot of coaches who might specialize even in anxiety. If you don't think you need medication, that's not a bad thing. But you just really want to make sure that you're meeting with someone who can meet your needs and that they have a depth of understanding about what you're bringing in, because you want to get the most bang for your buck and you want to be able to solve the problem quickly. You don't want to be sitting and 5 sessions later still be introducing yourself to somebody. You want to actually have some takeaways.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah, here's a question, and I see this in people and who've experienced addictions. What is your advice to someone who has experienced a long-standing addiction and now after a year and a half of sobriety is having high levels of anxiety in the absence of that addictive behavior?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. We use substances on the surface for so many reasons, but the core reason we use substances is because they're numbing. I don't want to feel this trauma from my past. I don't want to feel so anxious every time I go out into a public setting. So when I have this substance, I can handle that better. I just feel a little less on edge. So when we come off of that substance, the goal would be to replace the substance with something healthy for us to still be able to cope, because it's a coping skill. It may not be the most adaptive coping skill that we have available to us, but it is, and that's why we turn to it in the first place. So very, very grateful that you've gotten to this place of sobriety. That's great. The next step is what do I put in that place? Because we just left a big hole in terms of how I cope with things. We need to put something else in there that's going to be effective. And there's tons of things on this sheet. There's tons of things we've talked about tonight that you can try. I am going to shamelessly plug see a counselor. I think they can help you figure out, based on your history, based on all of the factors, what's going to be helpful for you to try instead.
I think a lot of times the reason I see people use substances or use something else is because they're actually self-medicating rather than medicating with the right thing. So going back to the cupcake analogy, if you have ADD, I didn't get on any ADD medication until I finished my PhD, which people were like, that's crazy that you made it through. But you kind of white knuckle yourself through a lot of situations that you have to until you can't anymore. So for me, it's like, I look at people and I'm like, I can only imagine what that would feel like for anxiety or depression or ADD or all those things, is we're white knuckling it through it, right? We're like, okay, cool, like having a shot of vodka or having a cupcake or working out 5 times a day. I mean, addiction is not always a substance like drugs and alcohol. It can be, something that you do online. It can be food. It can be healthy things like working out, like I said. But what we're doing is we're taking that thing and self-medicating when there's really something we could do or take that would truly fix the problem. So getting to the root of it, which is what I've said a few times, is the key, right? Like, hold on a second. So when you have to spend time with your in-laws, you always find that you're drunk. Christmas is coming. But like literally, I just think about that, right? Like, okay, so there's something about that, right? That's provoking anxiety. So the root of the problem isn't drinking more before you go visit your in-laws. The root of the problem is figuring out, what are they reminding you of? What are they triggering in you? What is the feeling you're feeling that you just don't want to feel? And is there a way that you can work on that in the moment? There's also medication that sometimes people will take in the moment to help their anxiety, and they're not on something every day. They just take it when they know that they're walking into a hard situation. On the airplane, or a speaking engagement or a large social event. So the self-medication comes when we're trying to fix the problem, white-knuckling it on our own.
This is a great question. If we were built for connections, how are people with social anxiety supposed to go against that by connecting with people and worshiping with others? How are they supposed to socialize when that freaks them out? Especially when it doesn't make a difference if it's one person or 100 person. So how do people come into a church like this size and be able to connect and be able to have the spiritual experience, but they suffer from social anxiety?
Yeah, this is so hard, because the first piece of this that I want to address is that this is the enemy. The enemy benefits from you not coming and socializing with other people and worshiping publicly. He wins in that scenario. So that makes sense, right? Why this is a very, very hard place to come to. So I want to validate, if you're there, there's nothing wrong with you. This is a struggle you've been dealt that we didn't choose, but a struggle nonetheless, and what do we do about it? So I would encourage all of us to think in much smaller steps. So for me to achieve the goal of coming into a worship service on a Sunday morning, maybe the biggest service, we're gonna start many, many, many steps back from that. I was talking to someone in our leadership who had been trying to get someone to come to church, had been really, really working on this person, and it was a struggle. And the person on our staff suggested, hey, there's this side door. Why don't you park on that side and come in the side door? You walk straight into the auditorium, you sit at the back if you want, and you leave before you have to talk to anybody. Believe it or not, that's a social experience. It doesn't matter that you didn't talk to anybody or shake anybody's hand. It was exposure to a social situation that was a positive experience, and you left feeling like this place could be safe. I could maybe do this again. So that's a church version. We could also take it much smaller. We could say, I really want to have friends, and I just have the hardest time when my girlfriends invite me to go out to dinner. We go back to something Cassie was talking about earlier. Maybe I say, I would really love to get coffee with this one person at this specific time on this specific day when I have the bandwidth to try. And I get to determine how long that coffee date lasts. That may last 10 minutes, and I need to leave, and that's okay. See every little bit as progress. It doesn't have to be jumping to the end result on the first try. That's really not setting ourselves up for success.
That's awesome. I also think too, I know I say it, but you got to go back. Like, I think that's 100%. I agree. And I think even if it is just one person, you've got to find one safe person, I mean, and maybe you haven't found them yet, and I'm sorry, but one safe person is a start, just somebody that you can talk to. But I think you weren't born with this problem. I had this guy, and I tell this story a lot, and he knows I tell it. I don't say his name, so it's okay. But like, he is an executive, super successful, multiple homes, multiple planes. And he came and sat down across from me, and I just was like, what is this guy doing here first? Like, what am I going to do for him? But we talked and we talked and we talked, and he was like, I just feel like I'm failing. And I'm like, you want to give me a house and a plane? Like, I mean, it's okay. But like, literally by the world's standards, he wasn't failing at all, but he felt like a failure. So I just kept asking the Lord. I was like, okay, what is it? What's the deal? Because like, people weren't understanding. He was telling this to people. Well, we traced it back, and in third grade, he got made fun of playing a game of waste basket basketball. Like where you crumple up the piece of paper and you toss it in the trash can. And he said, they made fun of me so bad. And we so dissected the story. And I just was like, my jaw on the floor, probably not my best therapist moment, but I'm like, are you kidding me? This dude is still in his mid-40s riddled with shame from a game of waste basket basketball. And wouldn't that be what the enemy would want? Is for him to stay captive to this moment in third grade, that then he drags it forward just like a big old bag of luggage into today. And so I don't believe you were born with social anxiety. I do believe that's probably an environmental thing. Something happened to you. Maybe you were put in a situation or a scenario that didn't feel safe or comfortable to you. But ask the Lord to show you what that is. Because if you can go back and bring truth to that situation, then hopefully that truth will be the luggage that you drag into the future.
All right, we got very little time. I got a question for both of you, and you both get 60 seconds to answer.
Clearly, we've been talking too long.
Yes. So, Bree, what is your best tip to help us survive the holidays?
60 seconds. Boundaries. Really, really hone in on some boundaries. Those can be individual boundaries, interpersonal boundaries. I think we lose the joy of the holiday season because we overschedule, we overplan, we overspend, we overeat. There are so many ways that we overconsume, and it's really, really depleting for us. So setting boundaries might look like, on this day, I'm putting it on my calendar for my whole family to see. I will not see anyone on this whole day. I will be in my pajamas and I will watch a show and I will do nothing. That's a boundary, and that's healthy because that builds up your tank to go spend it somewhere else. And then they may be more concrete, where you have to have a conversation by saying, Mom and Dad, we're so excited to see you for Thanksgiving. Our family will be there from noon to 3 p.m., and then we have a heart out. And that may feel uncomfortable, but it's protecting your peace. It's protecting the joy of the season so that you don't get worn out by all of the extra.
All right, Dr. Reid.
Okay.
Last question, 60 seconds. What is your best tip to help all the married people in the house have the very best holiday ever?
Married. Oh, look, he changed the question. I was ready. Healthy expectations and high communication about your expectations, I think, are the key, right? Sometimes, so often we have this scenario that we have in our head, like built up, where it's like it's going to look like this. The more we communicate, the higher the dial or the volume is on our communication, the more likely we are to have our expectations met and or at least discussed and understood. And I think just like that, we're going to leave it 3. It's like you're communicating your expectations to your family and to everyone. So there's not a question about your motive. It's a question of, we've set the boundary, we've set the thing. And I think with couples, it's so important that you do everything you can to remain in unity. Like even a list, like what do we want to do this year? What are our absolute musts? We're putting those on the calendar, and anything else we get to do is bonus. But if we can hit these 3 things, we're super happy.
Hey, this was great. Give it up for Dr. Reid. Very good. You're our FOTP favorite, so we hope to have you back.
Thank you. No, I'm honored.
Yes.
Anytime. I love to come.
Oh, good. Dr. Bree.
Not a doctor.
Dr.
I love
Bree.
that. Give her the title.
Thank you. Close us out.
Yes. As we wrap up tonight, I just want to thank you guys. This is a talk about anxiety, so you may have had some anxiety coming here tonight. But you made this choice because you wanted to make a next step in managing that better. Maybe you came to support a loved one who struggles with anxiety, and our biggest prayer for this night is that you walk away feeling a little more informed, a little more hopeful, and you have at least one next step to take. If you got this sheet, please don't leave this building without this sheet. There are probably 70 items on this sheet of things you can do. I want you to go home, and I don't want you to do all of them.
That will
Don't
give you
do
anxiety.
it. Don't do it. Trying to do 70 things is setting ourselves up for failure because we're going to be anxious about the fact that we're not getting them all right and stressed out. So choose one thing. I want you to leave here committing to one thing that you're going to try. And that may be something you try tomorrow or over this entire holiday season, and that's okay. Put this somewhere that you will be able to pull it back out and try the next thing. The way that we work through anxiety and really any mental health struggle is one little step at a time. So really, I want to encourage you to make a commitment to make that choice. I do want you to also look on the back of that sheet. I have several book suggestions, some podcast suggestions. Just what is going to be the easiest way for you to get a little more of this information and take that next step? Your next step may be listening to a podcast, and we can all do that, right? So whatever that step is, just make that commitment. I also have a section on Bree's tips to enjoy the holidays. Y'all, some of this we talked about with boundaries and expectations. Choose to have this conversation now. We are about 2 weeks out from Thanksgiving. Have these conversations now with your people, with your loved ones, and get on the same page, be in unity, like Cassie said, to set yourselves up to enjoy this season. I'm so grateful that you guys chose to be here tonight. We are going to be up here at the end if you want to reach out to anybody to ask for next steps and resources. At all of our campuses, we will have staff and advocates at the front of the stage, so please make sure and reach out if you need anything. And I'm going to close us in prayer. Dear God, I thank you so much. I just thank you for the way that you've moved tonight, the way that you have spoken through Dr. Reid and Roger and I. I thank you for the courage of all of these people to show up, Lord, to take a step that maybe was terrifying to walk through these doors. We know that effort was not in vain, Lord, that you will bless every person who walked in here. I pray that you would just be with all of us through this holiday season, that we would feel your presence, that we wouldn't lose sight of the purpose of this season, Lord, and that focusing on you and the true reason for this season, Lord, that we would experience great joy and connection and love with the people around us. I pray for anybody who's struggling with their next step, Lord, just help them to have a little bit of courage, a little bit of bravery to come talk to us so that we can help them move in the right direction. God, we thank you for the ways that you're going to continue to move through this talk and the ways that people walk out of here tonight. We love you and we thank you. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Y'all have a good night.
Have a great night.